One of the things that set Batman the Animated Series apart from many other Batman adaptations that predated it is the way that they reimagined the villains. In the show, very few of Batman's rogues were generic thieves with peculiar gimmicks. The majority were tragic figures with personality flaws who sought revenge on the people who wronged them. Many of them had legitimate grievances. It's just their response to that grievance that made them villains. However, there was one villain who suffered a tragic fall from grace, losing his business and his reputation, who cast blame on a mostly innocent figure. This is the story of Temple Fugate, the Clock King. Before going into depth on the animated version of the Clock King, I believe it's important to first look at the comic book original character to help demonstrate how wildly different BTAS's version was. It may surprise you to learn that the Clock King is not usually a Batman villain. Instead, he's a Green Arrow villain, often clad in a green, white and blue costume complete with a clock face mask. That's not the only way he differs from the animated counterpart. William Tachman was a watchmaker who learned that he had a fatal illness and only had a few short months to live. Fearing what would happen to his sickly disabled sister after he was gone, Tachman decided to spend what little time he had left committing robberies to build a fortune to pay for her care. However, after Green Arrow apprehended him, he learned his doctor was mistaken. He was perfectly healthy, so he had thrown away his entire life for nothing. While incarcerated, his sister was put in a state-run care home where she quickly died. Blaming his doctor and Green Arrow, Tachman vowed to take revenge. Outside of the first handful of stories, the Clock King wasn't very prominent. He appeared as a member of the Injustice League and the Suicide Squad over the years, but mostly in the background, written off as a silly character. The Clock King's other notable appearance, and most likely reason why he eventually found his way to BTAS, is in a two-part episode of the 1960s Batman show. In this universe, the Clock King is the Mad Hatter's brother, but he's fixated on clocks. I guess unhealthy obsessions with objects run through the family. Despite appearing in only one story, this version of the Clock King was probably the most well-known, and part of why he had been written off as a silly character. When it came time for the writers of BTAS to define their rogues gallery, the writers took everything they liked about the Clock King, a time-related tragedy that led to personal ruin, and changed pretty much everything else. If you're a regular viewer of my BTAS videos, then you'll already know the writers' philosophy on adapting villains. For anyone that's late to the party, they were not slaves to continuity. Instead, they took what they liked about the characters, enhanced or expanded upon the good parts, and dropped everything that didn't fit the show's tone. Seriously, go watch all my BTAS video essays, like them, leave a comment, share them, feed the gaping maw of the YouTube algorithm. The BTAS version of the Clock King debuted in the not particularly imaginatively titled episode, The Clock King. The episode's original title was Time, See What's Become of Me. But director Kevin Altieri and producer Bruce Timm thought it was a bit pretentious. The reference to the opening lyric from the Bangles song Hazy Shade of Winter wasn't appropriate for the character, so they changed it. As an aside, Bruce Timm and Kevin Altieri generally aren't fans of the more abstract titles, and instead referred to episodes like The Cat and the Claw and Feet of Clay as Catwoman and Clayface, respectively. Their version of the Clock King was renamed Temple Fugate, a play on Latin tempus fugit, meaning time flies. And he was reimagined as an efficiency expert whose company went bankrupt after he lost a lawsuit from a dissatisfied client. Fugate submitted an appeal in a last-ditch effort to save his life's work, but the stress was getting to him. Hamilton Hill, an acquaintance of Fugate's, casually advised Fugate that he needed to loosen up if he wanted to stand a chance of winning his appeal. Someone that wound up would make the judge assume they were guilty, he argued, and he advised him to change up his meticulous schedule and let his hair down a little. Note that this took place before Hill became Gotham's mayor. Fugate decided to take his coffee break at a different time than usual and outside at a nearby park to help him relax. Sadly, a series of unfortunate incidents resulted in him being late to his appeal hearing and losing by default. Losing the case broke Fugate's mind, and he decided that Hill had intentionally sabotaged him, so Fugate meticulously planned his revenge for years. Now, this was completely preposterous because there's no way that Hill could orchestrate a group of schoolchildren accidentally hitting him with a ball, a strong breeze blowing his paperwork into a fountain, or a dog off its leash barking and making Fugate fall into a fountain. It's a testament to Fugate's insanity that he genuinely believed that Hill was out to get him. Frankly, Hill barely knew who Fugate was. He didn't even realise that his law firm was fighting the case against Fugate. But Fugate knew and imagined an elaborate conspiracy against himself. He's so delusional and completely incapable of accepting that there are things that can happen that are outside of human control. Fugate's real strength is his meticulous planning ability. He's able to anticipate almost every likely outcome and plan a strategy accordingly. However, he lacks creativity and instead focuses on predictable things, like train schedules. When trapping Batman in a near foolproof trap inside a bank vault that's being drained of oxygen with a bomb inside of it, he fails to consider that Batman might be able to devise a creative method of escape. Batman unwound the tape from the cassette that Fugate had left to relay his plan, and built a small pulley that allowed him to safely dispose of the bomb and create an exit. When Batman tracks down Fugate's base of operations, he had used an expensive watch as part of his device, one that had been registered to Fugate, we see that the workshop's walls are covered in clocks from floor to ceiling, creating a bellowing, persistent ticking sound. The only other thing of note on the wall is a vandalised poster for Hill's mayoral re-election. This indicates that two things are important to Fugate: time and revenge. His actual scheme against Hill started out innocent enough. Fugate sabotaged the traffic lights in Gotham, causing gridlock and creating a large audience for his anti-Hill campaign. Note that Fugate doesn't endorse or try to assist other candidates, he only cares about making Hill look bad. At the height of tensions, he explosively unveils a new billboard saying, "Time for a change," with a crudely vandalised image of Hill. If that was all Fugate had in mind, then I doubt he would have had to worry too much about Batman. But Fugate wasn't satisfied with simply shaming Hill. He wanted him dead, and he didn't care who he had to hurt along the way. Fugate's campaign of revenge saw innocent people being sedated in a bank to trap Batman, and untold casualties after he derailed the new metro line to act as a distraction while he kidnapped Hill. Despite Hill's significance in his own life, Hill barely remembers Fugate. There's a delightfully funny moment where Fugate has Hill tied to the hour hand on a clock tower, moments away from being crushed by the minute hand, and Hill genuinely has no idea why he's in this predicament. This ruffles Fugate's feathers, and he removes his clock-themed glasses as if they had masked his identity. In the end, he has to spell it out for Hill. Again, it's a wonderful demonstration of how deluded Fugate is. He believed himself to be some arch-rival of Hill's, someone Hill had set out to destroy. But he had almost no recollection of him. When Fugate's plot is foiled by Batman and Hill is saved, the Clock King manages to evade capture amid the chaos of the clock tower collapsing. This whole section of the episode where Batman and the Clock King fight among the inner workings of the clock tower was a delightful reference to the anime Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro, directed by Hayao Miyazaki, who Kevin Altieri revered. Note that that film was produced when Miyazaki was at animation studio Tokyo Movie Shinsha, the same studio that worked on some of BTAS's best episodes like Two-Face Part 1 and Feet of Clay Part 2, coincidentally also directed by Kevin Altieri. The Clock King returns in the episode Time Out of Joint, armed with a strange device that allows him to slow and speed up time. This might sound a bit outlandish for an episode of BTAS, but remember this was the later stages of the series when it had been rebranded to The Adventures of Batman and Robin. During this time, the creative team decided to flex their muscles and put Batman in more outlandish situations, like Avatar, where he fought an ancient soul-sucking mummy, or Showdown, which was set almost entirely in the Old West. In the time since he was defeated, Fugate went into hiding, posing as a butler named Harold. He worked for a scientist named Dr. Wakati, who had developed a device that granted the wielder control over the speed at which time moves. With these fantastic new abilities, the Clock King could have achieved anything, but all he wanted was to get revenge on Hill. His first test run involved stealing an antique clock from an auction, but he had no interest in the money. All he wanted to do was make sure that he had a grasp of his abilities. Once he had got away with the crime, he threw the valuable clock in the bins. His primary goal was to kill Hamilton Hill. This makes him fairly unique among the Batman villains in that the others who sought revenge, like the Riddler or Clayface, never went after their original targets after being foiled, but for the Clock King, it was his entire raison d'etre. Once again, his pettiness and lust for vengeance would be his undoing, and he was caught and sent to prison. The Clock King's final appearance came in the Justice League Unlimited episode Taskforce X, where we see that he is one of many incarcerated rogues who Amanda Waller and Cadmus have recruited. Fugate is part of Taskforce X, the DCAU version of the Suicide Squad. Fugate is the brains behind the team's mission to steal the powerful Annihilator armor from the Watchtower right under the Justice League's nose. His attention to detail, planning everything down to the last second, ensures that the mission runs relatively smoothly for Rick Flag, Deadshot, Captain Boomerang and Plastique. However, he couldn't account for every single possibility, much in the same way that he couldn't envisage Batman using the cassette tape to aid his escape back in the Clock King. With a little creative thinking from Deadshot, most of the team could escape with their intended loot. And the Clock King's reward for a successful mission was a reduced sentence. We don't see the Clock King again in animation, but the DCAU tie-in comic Batman Adventures Volume 2, number 12, showed us what the Clock King got up to after his release from prison. When Hamilton Hill lost the mayoral election to the Penguin, he retired to Bloodhaven. The Clock King followed him to the city and set up a new identity for himself: Nicholas Simon, travel agent. Batman had earlier challenged the Riddler to prove his superior intellect by figuring out how the Penguin had stolen the election. After all, no one would willingly vote for an obvious crook, right? And his investigation led him to the Clock King. There was a struggle when Riddler tried to hack into his computer, and the Clock King stabbed Riddler before he could flee. The Riddler collapsed at Hamilton Hill's residence before cryptically referring to a cellar and saying that time flies. Presumably the Riddler knew that Batman would follow up on his investigation and didn't want to just hand the answer to him. Either way, it would have saved a lot of time if he had just said what he knew. The irony was that the Clock King didn't have anything to do with the Penguin stealing the election. In fact, there was no solid evidence that the election had been stolen at all. No, all Fugate wanted to do was to be close to Hill so that he could witness his final years in exile and despair, all while running a legitimate travel agency. And when the Riddler almost exposed his secret, he lashed out. It's really funny because he had actually committed no crime until he stabbed the Riddler, and now he was on his way back to prison. So, in summary, the thing that I really like about the Clock King is that he is incredibly driven and focused, but he lacks imagination. He deals with facts and certainties and lacks the capability to deal with hypotheticals. He gives off strong neurodivergent vibes, where his unconventional thought process acts as a superpower of sorts. His obsession with avenging himself against Hamilton Hill, an aloof, bungling buffoon, is just the icing on the cake. Where other villains could let go of their vendettas after Batman intervened and embrace their new identities, Temple Fugate held on to his identity as Master of Efficiency because that's all he had left. He was so tightly wound that when he lost his company he snapped, desperately looking for somebody to blame other than himself. Remember, he had already lost the initial lawsuit at the start of the Clock King. He was just appealing against the judge's ruling. Ultimately, the Clock King was entirely to blame for his own downfall. All 3 times. But he was too arrogant to accept it. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now. Next time, I'll be back on Monday to talk about the winner from my most recent The Batman villain poll, the nefarious Hugo Strange and his unending quest to understand the criminal psyche. And then next Friday, it'll be time to talk about a pair of villains from Superman the Animated Series who were, in many ways, dark reflections of the Man of Steel. Yes, we're talking about the treasonous Kryptonians, Jax-Ur and Marla. Hope to see you then.